Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Data Leaps. Today, we have the honor and the privilege to welcome my coworker and teammate, Daniel, back to the channel. He's the first reappearing guest. And today, he will show us a demo that he's built using Lakehouse apps on top of a series of components on Databricks, consist of things like DLT, workflow, Databricks SQL dashboards or AIBI dashboards. And without further ado, let's introduce Daniel. Hi, Daniel. Welcome back.
Anything. How's it going? Nice to be back.
Thank you. Thank you very much to coming back and show this really cool demo you've built. Do you want to talk us through what you've built, different components, and let's see how it works? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So what I've built is a clone of the popular Chromium Dino game. You know, when you haven't got Signal and you can play the Dino game.
Familiar.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'll walk you through it all, but what I'm mostly doing is it's a simple Flask app that's running vanilla JavaScript, and it's got a couple of assets for the games and a bit of game logic. Um, And then I've got it running here locally on my desktop, just using my local environment. And then I'll show you deploying that to Databricks apps. It's super easy, just a couple of clicks. And then I'll show you it working and running. So in here, you can see I'm just running locally. And what happens is a little dinosaur begins the game, takes the keyboard inputs of jumping and ducking and things like that. And it's just calculating just rectangles overlapping each other, I guess.
Nice
And
touch with all the Delta Lake Spark
that
logos.
was the most development intense part of the entire process, to be honest, getting those logos to work at the right size. And what's happened is I've got a unique game ID and I've got a username based on some cookie data that I've made. And it's going to log all that game data and it's going to post it to a UC volume. So if I head over to Databricks and I go into my
For the
catalog.
audience who's not familiar with UC volumes, so, can you explain quickly what UC volumes are?
Sure. So I think we're all sort of familiar with various cloud storage buckets, right?
Mhm.
And a UC volume is just a piece of attached cloud storage. So in my case, I've got, within the catalog, I've got catalogs around, and I've got my schemas. So in this case, I've got a schema called Dino Game, and I've got a volume in here, and it's just a cloud storage folder. And you can see that I've got all of my games written in here. So it comes in with the game, the username, the game ID, and the date time it was played. And it's super
Nice.
easy just to be able to interact with them. I can grab files, download them. I can even create a table from one of the files that I've uploaded to volume. So it's a super easy and convenient way to not have to deal with all of your. I haven't got like the Azure portal open here, or I haven't got the AWS console open. I'm just within Databricks using an interactive cloud storage. Super
Nice.
easy. And that's where my game has just been deposited. And then in a bit, we'll see the pipeline running and things like that. That's going to model that game data and calculate high scores and all that kind of stuff. But first, I want to go from a sort of locally deployed game up to my cloud deployed game here. So if I head over to Databricks again, there's a few ways to get here, but I usually just go to the compute menu and press apps. And then I happen to have one already, but if I didn't, I could just press create app here. And there are a few sort of handy, useful templates with various different frameworks. Maybe you want to use Streamlit or Dash or whatever. Obviously, Gradio is really popular for your with chatbot use cases, but mine uses Flask because it's super simple. And then I can go create a custom app because I already know what I'm after. I can press next and I can give it a unique name and add some assets. But I've already done that. So if I go over to my Dino game here, to deploy it's super easy. So you just simply press the deploy button, and I can deploy the exact same stuff that I've got before. Or if I want to use a different source path for my code, go in here and I can navigate to other bits and pieces that I've got working. And all it's doing is it's just getting pointed at that directory within my workspace in Databricks. Head over to my Dino game. I've got all of the assets in here that I need to get my game running. and I've got all the assets that I need to get my app running. So I've got my app.py, and that's the same thing that you saw locally, where I'm looking at my submit game data route and I'm just posting that JSON object as a file into my UC volume. I've got some requirements and bits and pieces that I need to get the app running, super easy. And then my app.yaml file are just the components I need. So in this case, I'm using a Flask app, and I've got my catalog variables and stuff put in as well. And then whatever else I need. So it's not going to bother trying to deploy anything in the dashboard folder. You know, the apps and the frameworks are smart enough to know that those are just other assets for other things. So if I head over to static, I've got all of my assets in here. So I've got the background image and all the birds and stuff that I'm going to bring in. And I've got my single JavaScript file in here, and that's the one that's handling all of my variables, my game logic, what happens when things crash, and all that kind of stuff. And it is just a one-click deploy. So if I head over, it's probably done already. But yeah, there we go. Just deployed a second ago, and I can see which deployments were successful and which have failed. I can go through all of my deployment logs and things like that, and I can check. So you can see all of the stuff that came in from my app.yaml file, along with all of the other setup things that Databricks put in. They're all ready to go. And within a couple of clicks, I've deployed my game. And just to prove to you that it does work, I'll go back to my app. I'll go the real URL. And there we go. And you can tell it's different because I've got a different username based on different cookies and things. And if I again play my game, I'm going to run this container as that. Everything's going to go great. Submit my game data goes off to the volume. But from there, what's going to happen is I'm going to see that I've got a workflow in here. And I've got my Dyno processor workflow.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, for those who are sort of uninitiated, workflows are the orchestration part in Databricks. And I'm going to chain together loads of different things to get orchestrated in here. And remember my volume from earlier. I've pointed my workflow at that volume. So every minute it's going to check for new files arriving in that volume and then trigger a run of my workflow the second it finds one. So if multiple people are all playing the game at the same time, or I've only got a few users dotted around together, and then each time that trigger is hit, that trigger meets its criterion, I'm going to run my pipeline and I want to update my leaderboard. So this is DLT, which is obviously Databricks' sort of declarative framework for doing ETL stuff. And if I open the notebook in here, you can see the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find a bit of a structure and stuff for my game data. And I've got the score, my username, all that kind of good stuff. And then notably, I've got the obstacle that killed me in that particular game. So we'll be able to track the most lethal obstacles and things like that later on. I can set expectations. So I want to make sure that there's actually really is a score in the game. I don't want to have some sort of false write of the game file or anything like that. I want to make sure someone actually played. And I can just pull in everything from my volume. I'm going to quickly add a column about when the file was loaded. And I can go and transform different things. I can cast the obstacles and do all of your normal SQL or Python transformations. So if I go, I think there's a run in progress because I just obviously completed the game. I've just hit the trigger and now it's running. And now this pipeline will incrementally send all of my data through. It'll clean up the games from bronze to silver quality. It'll update my leaderboard and it'll figure out what the distribution of lethal obstacles is. So if I head over from there, I head to I can either go back to the workspace or I can go to my dashboards. And I've got my Dino game dashboard in here.
And I like how the dashboard name can be an emoji as well. Doesn't
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to be
yeah,
text. Yeah.
yeah. I didn't realize until I tried to do this. But you can see now that I've piped all of my game data through from the app in real time straight away. I've cleaned up my data, put it through a pipeline, and I can see how many unique players I've got, how many games have been played. I've got my leaderboard down the bottom, which I think distracted many people when I sort of first published this game. And I can see, based on that, this pipeline and how it's calculated my obstacles in here, what the most lethal obstacle was. And I could use this to refine whether obstacles are occurring too frequently. Maybe if one obstacle is way more lethal than it should be compared to how often it occurs in the data set. Perhaps I could tone that down. Maybe I could adjust my game logic, and then within a couple of clicks, redeploy my Databricks app straight back out for everyone to use.
Very cool. So TLDR, you got a game app running in the front end, collecting game statistics, dumping it into a UC volume, and then a workflow that contains DLT that's file arrival triggered. So it checks the pass every minute. If there's new game stats JSON arriving, it will trigger the workflow to run and clean the data, do the expectation, making sure there's a valid score, and then update this dashboard. So in the real world, if you don't have a game app, you might have some application that your end user, your customer, your partner, your vendors are using, and you're collecting different data points from them, and you can process that through workflows, DLT, and then build visualization dashboards based on the insights you're collecting from the app. That's
Yeah,
really
totally.
cool. What was the most difficult part? Because your app deployment looks quite slick, right? Like it's a few clicks of deploying. It doesn't look like you need to do a lot of refactoring to go from a local Flask app to a Lakehouse app. What would be the like for a person to get started with this? What would be the most difficult part?
You're right. The Once I'd got the things running locally in the way that I wanted to, getting them deployed was extremely easy. It was just a few buttons in the UI. You can do it locally as well if you've got, your Databricks CLI and everything installed, but that's much of a muchness. I think the worst, or I said the most difficult part was the game logic and just making sure that things collided in the right way, or you couldn't just like jump over absolutely every obstacle. And there are many, if you go on GitHub, there are loads of different examples of people cloning that Chromium app and stuff like that. But the only, because I've got no idea personally how to go about deploying an app like that without, I've got no idea how the containers would work. I've got no idea how to secure them and stuff and pass all the right permissions through, create the service principals, secure all that sort of stuff. That's something I've got no idea how to do. So as soon as I got the game logic figured out, being able to deploy that app in a couple of clicks and not really worry about the security and scalability of it all was really, really, really handy.
A quick question. In the app resources that you're showing on the screen, the service principal, do you know what the service principal is used for?
Yeah, so the I need to be able to give the app framework access to various different things. So
Right.
of course, if this was
Bodies. Yeah.
yeah, be able to write to that volume, be able to submit the game data, things like that. In the case where it was a more business centric app, obviously I wouldn't want to be passing everything through the same user ID, the same service principal. I'd look for like an OAuth approach and stuff like that, which would be completely reasonable, completely possible. But in my case, because I don't really mind, I don't really want to collect too much data about the user. I just want to be able to have some generic username created, and then write that data in as fast as possible. A service principal made sense to me at the time. But it's just so that there's the level of convenience offered by having it deployed within your sort of Databricks environment and not having to worry about machinations of security, reverse proxies, and all that kind of stuff. Um, and my sort of like time to launch very quick.
Very cool. What would be one piece of advice you would give to the audience that are looking to deploy Lakehouse apps on top of Databricks, maybe on top of a workflow or DLT that they already built? Is there anything that they need to watch out for? Like you said, it's quite simple and it's managed environment, but is there anything like gotchas or or learnings that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I would say it's good to be familiar with the Databricks SDK. So in my case, I need to be able to write to the write to the volume from my local machine and stuff like that and test things out locally. So a bit of familiarity with that is really good. And I would say they've set out initially with a template like this, just to sort of get yourself up and running. Those are super easy to launch and get started with. Even if you just want to use some demo data, you know, Databricks has all of the MIC taxi trips and all that kind of good stuff. But maybe just start out with that. A bit of familiarity with the SDK would be really good. And I would just say take it step by step. You can deploy um, iteratively very quickly. That app came up in a couple of minutes, and then deploying it was super easy. And if you just look at the logs, all of the information is here. And I think you can also go to blah 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 your app /logz logs, get some other information, and just find out what's going wrong. Typically, what I find when I've done these is that I've created the app, but I haven't given the newly created service principal the right permissions on my piece of Unity catalog resources or whatever. So just have a little look in here, check what the logs are, and figure out what's going on. And I think another piece of advice I would give you if you're starting out is you can get a lot done with these environment variables. So if I go back in here and go to my Dino game, you can get a lot done in here. I've seen people put all sorts of different environment variables and options and stuff in here to get them going, which definitely recommend doing that. And then one final piece of advice is do be a little bit careful about which ports you're using. Because obviously if it works on your local machine, just be mindful of the ports and the stuff that you're using when you're deploying the app, just in case you see some sort of changes there. Yeah. Other than that, I think it's really easy to get set up and get going.
Cool. And just one quick one as well. Obviously, Daniel did it in Python using Flask, but Lakehouse apps also supports other languages. You might have seen Shiny in the template bit,
Oh yeah.
which is using R. So you could use potentially different languages to write the applications. Doesn't necessarily has to be Python or Flask. Can be Streamlit, which then again is also Python. So depending on what your skill set and what you're familiar with, you can write different type of applications on top of Lakehouse apps. Right? Cool. All right, thank you, Daniel. This has been very, very insightful and really cool demo. Thank you for coming to the channel and show it. Thank you for watching Data Leaps. If you think the content is useful, please like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it.